Okay, so to take a look at specifically the nature healing changes, not really much change at all. I'll put it up on the half the side of the screen here, what actually changed. But in terms of it, it's really just insectoid form. The poisons, or essentially for healer regards, the pheromones, are no longer shared. That really only is an issue just if there is like a nature healer in the group. It just means that a nature healer can't put out like Blossom, Metabolism, and Savage Growth, and all of a sudden you use Flourish, and then basically you refresh their pheromones. It doesn't work like that. Now, whatever pheromones you put out, like if you use Blossom, Metabolism, and Savage Growth, and use Flourish, you're refreshing your own pheromones. So you're not doing anything else. You're spreading and refreshing your own pheromones rather than another nature healer. Same thing, just like a nature healer can't use Harvest anymore and refresh the poison for nature DPS. It doesn't work like that. It's nothing that should have worked. The only reason why nature was running Harvest was to basically just reset the poison so that the nature DPS could exploit with Roar. Well, I mean, not exploit. Bug, cheese, whatever you want to call it. I mean, technically it's not an exploit, but I mean, it's just like the cheesiest possible thing you can do with nature. Yeah, if you want to just abuse Roar. So yes, the only reason why a nature heart would use Harvest would be so that the other natures in the group could abuse Harvest. That's a better way to put it. So not like it really impacted your healing loadout whatsoever at all. Not like your loadout or rotation is going to change at all. You have the option whether or not to use insectoid form. This was the other thing that saw the biggest change. Why? Because bug form used to be, it was a 12-second cooldown on bug form. Gemini lasted for 6 seconds, so it's basically you just kept even with Scrap the Soul Cloak, you would literally never run out of supercharge. So you'd pop in and out of bug form, give either Gemini, Caster's Watch to the entire group, and that's what was broken. That's what was completely broken, because there's no you're not supposed to be giving that much supercharge out. What the point is the DPS, and then all of a sudden, all the power sets that have good DPS supercharges like Electric, Rage, Earth. I mean, what's the point of trying to DPS against an Earth DPS when they can use Entomb off cooldown for the entire raid? So every 30 seconds they can use Entomb. So I mean, it's an unrealistic way to DPS, and it just makes it completely skews the difficulty for content. So now, insectoid form is a 30-second supercharge, and it's up from a 2,500 power cost to 5,000. So it just makes it in line with other healer supercharges. What changed with it? So we can kind of go into it here. So what I'll do is I'll pop Gemini back on. We'll get in combat. And we'll pop bug form. So in insectoid form, we got 15% critical healing chance for 15 seconds. That has been increased up from 13, so another 2 seconds. 10% healing bonus, 15 seconds, and 30% critical healing magnitude for 15. So you got a small increase on the buffs, which most people don't stay in bug form to heal. The only healers that I've seen stay in bug form to heal were ones that wanted to use flight in innocent. Like say there's no grounding in a raid. Like Zoo Elite was a huge culprit of this on the tornadoes on second boss. So you stayed in bug form, so basically you could exploit flight. Well, it's not really exploiting flight. You're exploiting that there's no proper grounding mechanic. But most of the time, it was just you'd go into bug form, you'd hit like cross paw or jump clip boom or something like that, and then go back into normal. And that's what nature healers did before. So now all of this is going to bug form. You can still do that. You can still have access to a second loadout. But now, what's the point really? There's no extra benefits to bug form when you might as well run like regeneration, which at least gives healing to the group. Regeneration. Same thing, 30 second 5,000 power cost, 30 second 5,000 power cost, or if you wanted to, a Pheromone Bloom, this is going to be a 2,500. It's still a 30 second power cost, but if you wanted a little bit cheaper of a supercharge generation rather than 5,000, you could use Pheromone Bloom. It's a burst heal, achieves the same effect. But that's essentially what changed with nature healing. All it is impacting insectoid form. Because of the potential to skew content. And the other thing, now that it is a proper supercharge, we have the Supercharged Insectoid Form 3 head mod. So grant 5% supercharge back. That's typically what you would with any supercharge of 30 seconds and 5,000 power costs, is you're going to have that back. So just to recap again, cooldowns increased from up to 30 from 12. The power cost is doubled in terms of supercharge cost. The buffs last another 2 seconds, and this new tactical mod. So that's the quick and dirty summary to what's changed for nature healing. It's not really, we're not trying to balance nature healing. I know a lot of people are asking for nature to have like an 8-man shield, which I'm sure that's a completely viable suggestion. But the purpose of this was just to basically just address what was bugged and what was overperforming as nature. So that's why it was really the only thing that got changed with nature healing was the insectoid form, because it wasn't looking at balancing the power set. It was just looking at balancing what the bugs were. Okay, so taking a look at the changes to Nature Gorilla, we'll put them up on the screen here so you can read along. Not really too much changed with Gorilla. A lot of it was just damage tuning. So in terms of healers no longer get 10% damage for DPS roll, that doesn't really apply to Gorilla. That really applied only to Wolf. That's just be with I didn't see anyone going into healer stance and going to Gorilla to proc the Eye of the Gemini. That was just Wolf, because obviously the cooldown was a lot less than 30 seconds, so you wouldn't be doing that in Gorilla. Maybe I missed it, or some other people did in raids, but I rarely, if ever, saw that. So they just made it to apply to Gorilla as well. So you've got the next 3 changes are just damage tuning, so you don't get the additional 10% roll buff, which was the same in Wolf. It was just Wolf and Gorilla were getting extra damage bonus basically in the form changes. And then also the temporary buff damage went down from basically from 20 seconds to 15 and 35 to 30. So it's just basically just taking moments to adjust Gorilla's damage. And then the other issue, which you can't really show in practice here, is countering enemies. So I'm sure plenty of you have seen videos, or plenty of you have seen hits yourself when you counter a boss and you're getting like 150k damage from it. The Gorilla counters were huge, and it's been like that for a long time. So now you're not going to get that excessive damage anymore. I'll show you the Gorilla taps, but you're not getting that huge counter damage anymore, which is, it was rare. Like, it's not going to happen every single time, because you got the tanks countering, healers, controllers, stuff like that. So, but when it did happen, it was a giant hit, like 150, 200k hits that I'm sure you've all seen before. So what we'll do is we'll jump on the regular Gorilla rotation. So really, what's changed with Gorilla isn't so much the nature change, it's the change to heat vision. Heat vision was the primary source of total damage for nature. 40% of nature's damage came from heat vision because of the non-splitting damage, because everything else was just dots. So really what has hurt nature, or at least in Gorilla form, is heat vision. So I'm not going to mess around trying some different rotation. I'm just going to show you the exact same ones so you can get a feel what it was going to look like on live server. I'm sitting at about 72k might. On live server, got like 76. But we still have Transstrat Solar. You may even find yourself still using heat vision, because the point of heat vision was to have more dots to proc the strategist card, because the strategist card is where now the primary source of damage for nature comes from, at least for ranged, because you've got all the dots ticking, all the criticals on the dots, you've got heat vision dots, you've got heat vision the channel itself. So all these opportunities to proc the strategist card, that's where nature always shined. So let's just get into it here. We'll pop Psychic on. Actually be quite beneficial if I actually had a combat log up. 30 seconds, that's fine. Let's go 10, because we'll keep it 30. So we got 1.1 mil there. Or not 1.1, one, but you get what I mean there. 115k. So before, even in my nature guide, I think the same rotation would have been like 1.6, 1.7. There's a 1.2. So the damage difference, like you can see, Gorilla damage is still doing okay damage for ranged. The principal drop off is that heat vision change. That's what primarily affected Gorilla. So I really don't know if using like freezing breath is going to change anything really, because then you're losing all your ticks from heat vision, which just basically gave the opportunity to proc extra damage. So I don't need to keep going there. So you get the point there. So really, the rotation going from like 1.7, 1.8, 2 mil maybe, depending on your stats for ranged. Now it's going to be like 1.5, 1.2, or like around 1.2. 1.1 was the first parse. You're going to have at least 10 seconds that with no strategist proc. So that's obviously that's why that lower. And 1.2, 1.7, or that's 1.17. But you get the gist there. So really, the only change or nerf to nature Gorilla was just heat vision. Wasn't impacted by anything else. So as you can see, I wasn't doing weapon taps there. So if we did weapon taps here, that's what we're looking at now. So I'm not sure what my prec is here, because I know 30k prec. That's still pretty high. Because I'm pretty sure I get at least some. Yeah, this is 14k. Oh no, that was strategic card proc. Let's go into my logs. Yeah, so it's about the same. I was getting around 10k crits, base of 304. So the tap damage in Gorilla really didn't change that much, considering I'm spec'd what 75 skill points in a prec. So that's about the same. Okay, psychic. But the counter damage is the primary change there. So you're not going to get that, you know, a huge outlier damage in with your criticals. You're just going to have that regular tap damage. So that's about all the changes to Gorilla. Is it a giant nerf? No. I mean, it just keeps it competitive with everything else. There's plenty of other power sets for Might that do around 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 damage. Now that Gorilla is just not that huge outlier with heat vision. So it's one of the justifications. How could you say that, you know, you see those tiny little changes for Gorilla, so it's only the buff change, a 5-second buff, which wouldn't matter after 30-second purchase anyway, because you're not refreshing Gorilla that often. And then all we technically lost was the 10%, because everything else was a temporary buff that's only going to last for the first parse, which you didn't really care about for Gorilla. Gorilla is more of like a long-term range rotation. So really, we only lost 10%, but obviously it's a lot more than 10%, or a lot more than 10%, because we're used to getting like close to 2 mil parsers on 8 targets, 30 seconds. Now we're getting like 1.2. That's all heat vision. So it's one of those things where, how can you justify heat vision being the way it was before when it was accounting for that much damage for nature Gorilla? So really, nothing really changed with Gorilla. It's about the same. You'll just notice the reduced damage because of heat vision. So there may be another rotation out there, like I said, using freezing breath or sonic shout's not full range, but this is just showing you what you're used to Gorilla and what you're going to see now. Okay, so looking at the wolf changes, wolf is where nature changed the most, which made sense because that's what needed to change. So I'll put it up on the screen here, but the cooldown was increased to 30 seconds, up from 12. So that prevents the refreshing buffs constantly. That prevents the Gemini spam. So supercharged Koch increased to 5,000, up from 2,500. So once again, you're just not using Wolf as often as possible. Temporary buff is increased to 15 seconds, up from 13. So it means that when you're in Wolf, you do the buff damage slightly longer. That's all those criticals. Instead of lasting 13 seconds, they last 15, which is like the critical attack chance, critical ability. Healers will no longer get 10% damage increase on DPS roll while in wolf form. That just means that you're going to be less damage when you're proccing. Like, say you're healer going to wolf just to proc Gemini, you don't get any DPS buff. That you don't get the 10% roll buff there anymore. And then fixed additional issue where DPS was getting additional 10%. That's just the passive 10% buff that you got within the form change, that it didn't have anything to do with the temporary one. So what I'll do is same thing. I'll show you a basic rotation. So it's one of the primary things that this changes is that because the cooldown is not 12 seconds and 2,500 power cost, you can't refresh Wolf in between sets of ads all the time. If you have another like healer or tank in the group using Gemini, you can do that some of the time, but every single time you're not going to be able to refresh Wolf with it being 30 seconds and 5,000 power cost between each set of ads. So before you could do that, you pop Wolf, set up all your dots, you got massive crits for those set of ads, then the ads are dead, you move to the next one, you transform back to human, put the dots up back into Wolf. That was the typical rotation for Wolf. You can't do that now. With it being 30 seconds and 5,000 power cost, that's not happening anymore. So obviously in Wolf, you're going to require having those dots anyway, or at least one dot, because if you're going to stay in Wolf, then you need at least to have a couple dots set up. You're going to hinder yourself way too much having 3, because obviously you still need return to normal, but you have that ability there. So we'll just do the regular Wolf rotation. I think I'm still in 30-second parsers, which is fine. And then I think I'll just rebuff my might just to make sure it doesn't run out, because I can't remember last time I did. And my might's at 72k, which is low for a test server, just because I don't have anything else. I'm mostly spec for prec. So we're at the 72, where I'd be like 77 or 78k might on live. But just so you can kind of have a reference of testing. And I really don't need to keep continuing, because obviously you guys are well familiar with that rotation. I'm not using the Dervish rotation either. So 95, 1 mil. So you're still getting good damage out of Wolf. It's just that the fact that with the supercharge change, it's just not OP damage. You're not refreshing your Wolf every single time. You have to wait for the cooldown to roll out. You're going to have to make choices whether or not you want to stay in Gorilla form, because obviously Gorilla, you're going to have to keep that for single target regardless, or you have the extra AoE damage from like Impaling Thorns. So it's just that before now, Wolf was a clear choice. Even running something like Gemini you have the Gemini procs from Pollux's Gaze. You don't necessarily have that anymore, because same thing, 30-second cooldown and 5,000 power cost. So that's what you have to pay attention to before. So once again, not some huge, massive nerf. Like Wolf can still be practical. Wolf is still viable in damage. 1 million damage is pretty much a par for the course of what you're going to find for like Earth melee, stuff like that as well. So it's still practical. It's just that now you have to watch yourself, because especially in like regular, you're not going to have the opportunity to de-transform and set up your crits again, where obviously Wolf crits is going to be where not a huge chunk of your damage comes from, but it's still going to be a chunk of that damage, especially if you're going for burst. So you're always going to have to run like Call and Briar no matter what in Wolf. So if you're not resetting Wolf or having a supercharge spammer in the group, you're not going to be able to have those 3 dots anymore. Now it's only going to be 2, so that's going to be less damage. So it's just overall, Wolf is just much more trickier of a build now, because of not only the increase in the supercharge cost, but also the increase in the cooldown. So that's the primary changes to Wolf. Other than that, not too much changed.